Let's talk about Cities of Venus Survivors, an upcoming dice manipulation game about repairing a mech. Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald. In this episode, we're going to talk about an upcoming game. It's hitting Kickstarter tomorrow, actually, as I post this video. Tomorrow is the start of the campaign for this one. It's a game from the creators of Cities of Venus Lost Cities. That's Tin Robot Games. This is a game called Cities of Venus Survivors. This is a game that works with between 2 and 6 players. The version I received will play with up to 6. Games work with kids age 14 and up, and games take about 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes to play. Let's take a deeper look at Cities of Venus Survivors from Tin Robot Games. This is a great looking prototype. I think this is pretty much what backers are going to receive, but this is a crowdfunding campaign and things may change. So of course we might still be a little bit in flux here, but what a great looking copy I was sent by the folks at Tin Robot. Survivors is a game that I would say is on the heavier end of light. It's not quite medium in terms of its complexity. It's on the heavier end of light. This is a pretty good spot for my gaming group. A game that isn't too challenging to figure out, but you're still making some strategic decisions here. And it's a game where what you're doing is rolling dice and placing them on your player board to repair this mech. And you're going to win the game by, at the end, rolling the longest string of equal numbers. And it has to be the highest. If you have the same number as someone else, the tiebreaker is that you have to have the higher number. So if you roll 5 sixes, that's going to be better than 4 sixes. But if the highest roll is 4 fours and somebody rolls 4 fives, well then you're going to win the game with those fives. You do get to access some extra dice along the way, and there's a bit of engine building that's going on here in this game. The theme here is, well, this is a follow-up to Lost Cities, and here you've got a mech that's mining the surface of Venus, and you break down. You can't make it back up to the floating city in the sky, and so you're trying to repair your mech. You're exploring the terrain around your mech in order to gather this ore. There's black ore as well. Let me see if I can find a black piece. There's black ore also. You're rescuing engineers from the surface. You're scavenging mech parts in order to repair this mech and get it back up to the city. Each player is going to start with this player board. They're going to start with one little map square, but there's a whole deck of these, and as you explore around the surface, you can have up to 4 of these in front of you as you're trying to build up that engine. You're going to have a player readiness token, which acts almost like if you're at a Brazilian steakhouse, you might be familiar with these. You just flip it over when you're ready, when your turn is done. So once everybody's token is the same color again, then you can start the next round of the game. You're also going to start with 4 of these power dice. These are great looking colored dice. And these 4 power dice you always have through the game, but you're trying to collect some ore that will allow you to roll additional dice on your turn because that gives you more flexibility. Turns are played simultaneously. That's what this readiness token is all about. You're going to do your turn and then you flip it over when it's done. Everybody starts with the same color facing up, then you flip it over, and once all the colors are the same again, that's the end of the round. You can clean things up and get ready for the next round of the game. You're rolling these dice once, so you're not getting multiple rolls like you would get in Yahtzee, for example. You're rolling them once, but you're trying to build up an engine that will allow you to change the numbers on those dice or to roll some extra dice that will give you more options. Once you've rolled these numbers, you're just going to start placing them on your board, and that's going to give you some resources. So up here you can put any 3 dice with any number. That's really for leftover dice. If you get a poor roll, that's going to give you a piece, an exploration piece of the map. A very small piece, because that's one of the weaker actions in the game, is to just put 3 dice in that space. But you've got these Tetris-style polyomino pieces that are going to cover up your map to show where you've explored. So if I were to place 3 dice in here, I would get this piece, and then starting from my mech, I'm going to start covering up spaces on this grid. If I were to place this piece on the opposite side, that would allow me to take another map piece, and now I've got 2 pieces that I can explore. And I'm just trying to cover this up to show where my mech is going. Now, if I happen to get a run, I could potentially get some bigger pieces. A run meaning like this, 4, 5, 6. So if I place 4, 5, 6 here on my board, now I can get a larger exploration piece to put on my grid. If I manage to get a longer run even than that, if this one were a 3 instead, then I could get an even larger piece with 4 squares on it that are going to be covered. Dice plays here all have to be equal. You can put as many as you want, but they just have to have an equal number. And depending on how many dice you place, you're going to get a more powerful action. You might just get one little square that you can put on your board, which could be helpful if you're trying to cover everything up. You might get to scavenge a mech part. There's going to be a little marketplace of these spare mech pieces. You can hold 4 of them. There's a space here on the side of your board to show that you've got these parts collected, and you use these once in the game. So this piece, for example, would allow you to change a die face to a 2 and another die face to a 5. If you get 4 dice with an equal value, you're going to be able to grab one of these pink ore pieces, and that will go in your storage. You can only store 8, and we did find that the resource management was challenging. You had to decide when to use these things because extra ore is wasted. But if I spend these on my next turn, each one of these that I spend will give me an extra die that I can roll. And again, that's just going to give me more options. If on your map you cover a piece that has one of these gems, you get to put it in your storage space. But even more importantly, if you do manage to explore and cover up one of these little V-knots that are on your map, these are engineers. The engineer goes on your board, and then you're going to draft an engineer to your player board. These are powerful actions that can be used once per round, each round of the game, even in the final end game condition. You might be able to re-roll a die. You might be able to change a die face to a 3 or 4, move it up or down by 2. This was my favorite one. I think this one was probably the most versatile or most powerful, where this one would allow you to flip a die to its opposite side. And once you've got some pluses or plus or minus ones or plus or minus twos, flipping it over to its opposite side really allows you to control the value of the dice that you're playing with. Once you get one of those engineers, you just move it across your board to show that it's been used and you can't use it again in the round. So if I flip over one of these die faces, say changing a 5 to a 2, well, now I've used that guy. And this shows that he's not available anymore to be used a second time. So it's a neat little player board here that I think really fits with the style that Tin Robot was going for with these Cities of Venus games. What you're ultimately trying to do is to collect 5 of these fuel rods. That's going to trigger the end game condition. If I do manage to get one, say by putting 5 dice that are equal in value, or the other way to get one, well, you get 2 if you fill up one of these map tiles. If I fill up this entire card with exploration tiles, that's going to give me 2 of those fuel rods. And that was really a way that we move the game towards its ending condition, was with this. It was hard to get 5 dice that were equal. It was much easier to collect those little polyominoes and cover up your entire map like this. And you'll find that you're kind of racing to do that, to be the first one to get that 5th token onto your board. As soon as that happens, as soon as one player gets his 5th one, that's going to trigger the end game round where you're doing the launch sequence, is what it's called. Each player has their 4 power dice. They're also going to have a bonus die for each power core that they've collected along the way. So you still have a chance to win this game, even if you haven't collected all 5. It's just the people who have more of those power cores are going to have a better chance of winning, because you're trying to roll as longest string as possible of dice that have equivalent faces. In the end game, you can use that black ore. You can't use the pink ore to get extra dice. The only way to get your extra dice is by having more of these power cores. You can't use the scavenged mech parts that you found along the way. So you need to use these before somebody reaches the end game condition. You can, though, use, in addition to the black ore, you can use your engineers to manipulate your dice to try and get that longest string. You could also, if you had a bad roll and you had some bad luck, you might also place a die on your player board to move up or down one of your other dice to make that longest string. So that's the end game condition. You're just rolling that last stack of dice that you've got, and you're trying to accumulate the longest string. whoever has the longest at the end with the highest value is going to be the winner of Cities of Venus Survivors. What skills, though, are you working on when you play Cities of Venus Survivors? Well, there is a spatial problem-solving component. So you're exercising your visual spatial reasoning skills here because you have to figure out, based on the dice that you roll, the most efficient way to explore those tiles that you want to explore, to cover up your entire map, if that's what you're trying to do, or to get to those engineers. It's a race to get those engineers. There are fewer engineer cards than there are players. You're always going to put out one less than the number of players in the market of each of those. So you might be racing to get the engineer that you want. You can have a maximum of 4, but it does become quite a challenge to try and, well, like I said, there's one that I like the most, which was to flip over that die face. I wanted to make sure that I grabbed that one before it was gone. In a 2-player game, there's only one of each of those things. So you want to get the most powerful one as quickly as you possibly can. So you're trying to cover up the map, you're trying to get the resources you want, and to do that, you're collecting those polyomino tiles that come in this organizer. There's also a limited number of these tiles, so we found ourselves running out of the 4 square tiles, and that really made it difficult to cover up your map. You're finding yourself trying to collect 2 at a time per turn and then filling in whatever spaces you could in order to explore where you wanted to get to. So it is a game where you're not only trying to cover up those map squares, you're also planning ahead to make sure that you get those things before the other players take the resources you want. You're budgeting your dice, where you're going to place them on the board. You're budgeting your engineers. How am I going to use these engineers to get the best result that I want? You're budgeting your scavenge mech parts you're trying to make sure you spend them before somebody reaches the end game condition. There's a lot of planning and budgeting that's going on here. It's simple. It's straightforward. You're doing really one thing on your turn, rolling the dice and then placing them, I guess 2 things on your turn. But it does require kind of an organized approach with lots of resources that you have to budget. And whenever we're talking about planning ahead and budgeting, those are examples of executive functioning skills, those behaviors and skills that you need to work towards a goal. So this is a real light way, I think, to practice those skills, and everybody's working at the same time, so the game can move along fairly quickly. Final thoughts about Cities of Venus Survivors. Well, first of all, like I've said a couple of times throughout this video, this is a great looking game. I was surprised when I opened the box. I found the box cover is printed inside and out. This is not a prototype that I received from Tin Robot. This is like the pre-production copy, I think, of the game itself. You've got those translucent acrylic ore pieces, and then the black ones too. You've got the screen printed Power Core meeples and the V-Knot meeples here. This is a good looking game. The dice look great, and the bonus dice here, I'll grab one. The bonus dice are translucent, so they're real easy to see. They're just like, well, they're a little bit less pink maybe than the V-Knot ore, the pink translucent ore, but this is a good looking game. And it's kind of an interesting combination, right, of mechanics where you're playing this little puzzle in front of yourself. You're trying to add those Tetris pieces and cover up the spaces that you want to cover up. You're budgeting those dice and manipulating the values on the dice to get the things that you want, the resources that you want each round. And I found that to be kind of an interesting combination of mechanics, especially when you're racing to get certain things because some of the resources are limited here. That really did make the game kind of interesting and added a bit of, it's not direct player interaction, right? It's just you're just racing to get things before the other players draft them on you. It was surprising to us when we played the game how easy it was to get those die values that you wanted. Sometimes you get a bad roll and you'd sort of be stuck with dice that weren't so useful, but usually you could use maybe all but one of your dice in order to get something out of each turn. So that was a little bit surprising. We like how you would indicate that, oh, I've used this engineer already, and that limit of 4 engineers for scavenge parts as well is something that kind of kept you from just being able to do anything that you wanted at any given time. So you're limited in those resources, and that made things interesting as well. The limitation of 8 of these ore pieces that you can store at any given time too forced you to sort of spend them when maybe you would rather have saved them until the end game. If you're keeping those, you don't want too many black ones early in the game. You want lots of pink ones so you get the extra dice. The black ones that can be used at the end, but you probably want to save them unless you're trying to clear up space in your storage, your cargo hold. Are there downsides, though, to Cities of Venus Survivors? Really, I mean, it is a game that plays differently at different play counts. We did find with 2 players, we were more often, we both got to the 5 power cores on the same turn. So there was less of that racing, but more of the racing for the engineers along the way because there was only one copy of each one. So if there's a certain one you wanted, you were rushing to get it before the other player could. So it does play differently, I think, at different player counts. You're going to run out of those tiles faster with higher player counts, whereas you're running out of the engineers faster when it was just a 2-player game. It was fun at each play count. It was just quite a bit different. There is a lot of randomness too. So you could have bad luck with your dice and just, oh, I really need this on this turn and just not be able to get it. We didn't find that happen too often, that we were really stuck. We had to be a little bit flexible, but as the game wore on, there was less of that was required until the end game. The end game is much more luck based because you've only got your 4 things here, and then your player board where you can manipulate up or down by 1. But then you're using a die to do that, and that's limiting the number of dice that you have access to. So there is some randomness, of course. That's part of what makes it a light game that you can play with people who have, varying skill levels, I guess you could say. This is one that you could play, with kids as well as the grown-ups. But I've only played it with adults, and we did have a good time with it. So the other thing I would say, if we want to talk about downsides, like the components are great. The cardboard polyomino tiles, fantastic. The organizer is really good. We did find the map tiles, the exploration cards, to be a little bit thinner than the other components. I mean, it did mean that the box could be smaller and lighter maybe, but these were sort of the flimsiest part of the game. I would say also, whenever we're dealing with a game that has dual layer player boards, you probably want to put some of those silica gel packs in the box to make sure that things don't warp, because if this isn't flat, things are going to wobble a bit when you're trying to place your dice. But overall, wow, we had a good time with Cities of Venus Survivors. Um, it was so beautiful when I opened up the box and saw those dice and the gems and all, and the screen printed pieces. What a neat game. Really very different from the original Cities of Venus game, but you can still see the theme carrying through. The style carries through, and this time around you're doing more dice placement instead of worker placement. But what a great time we had when we were playing Cities of Venus Survivors. So thanks so much to Tin Robot for sending this game my way. If you have any questions about the campaign, I will put a link to the campaign in the show notes below the video, but if you have any questions or comments, you can, of course, leave them in the comments section below, or you can email me at brian@brainsongames.ca. Brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where future episodes will go. Previous ones are already up there. Brains on Games is the X handle and the Facebook page and the Instagram feed, so we're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to be notified of future ones, you can head on over to YouTube and click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.